Hello, this is Brandon Clayton, the Algebra Guy, and as you see on your screen, today we will be dividing decimals using long division. If long division wasn't complicated enough sometimes, we're going to use it with decimals, but you're going to see that it's not too bad once you get into it. So let's do just that. Let's go ahead and jump into it. So here are my questions for today. The question is, first, how do we divide decimals using long division? How can we use decimal division to find unit cost? So that's pretty cool. We have something that's relatable to real life, like the cost of something. How can we divide a decimal by another decimal? And how we divide a whole number by a decimal. Now, this is all without a calculator, so stay tuned and show you how to do that. So to understand decimal division, let's consider the multiplication problem right here. So if we have 0.2 times 4 equals 0.8, what that's really asking us, if you look at it in division, is what's 0.8 divided by 4? So if I took 0.8 and divided into 4s, so this is 0.8, and divided into 4s, I know each section is going to be 0.2. So that's the idea of dividing with decimals. It still works out even though you don't have whole numbers, but that's how it's going to look. I don't want that. All right, so how do we divide? So there's two steps here. Write a long division. Write as a long division problem, placing the decimal point in the quotient above the decimal point in the dividend. So that's a lot to say, but let's go ahead and do it. So this is 0.12 divided by 3. So I'm going to go 0.12 divided by 3. So this is 0.12 is being divided, so we put that in the box. That's the dividend. So this is our dividend. And this is our divisor. So if you hear those words, know the 3 is the one that's dividing them. The dividend is the one that's being divided. So let's divide as usual. And it said placing the decimal point in the quotient above the decimal point being divided. So we're going to put that there. And we're going to ask ourselves, like we normally do, can 3 go into 0? No. Can it go into 1? Nope. Can it go into 12? Yep, 4 times. And we do 4. We can do 0.04 times 3 gives us 0.12. Subtract and give us 0, and there's our answer. So, hey, pretty simple. Dividing by decimals is just like dividing by whole numbers. We just need to put that decimal there to make sure we keep it in the right place. So far, so cool. Pretty easy. So, like I talked about unit price, what if you have this situation? You got 24 water bottles at $3.99. How much is the cost of one water bottle? Or in other words, what's the unit price? Why is that important? Unit price is nice because when you're comparing two things and you know the unit price, you can compare them more fairly. So if you have another case that's like 36 bottles and it was $5.99, which would be a better deal? Well, if we knew the unit price, we could say, well, this per bottle is cheaper than this one, but we don't know that because we haven't done the math. So that's the significance of this. So let's go ahead and figure that out. So the real problem that we're looking at is what's $3.99 divided into 24? So what is $3.99 divided into 24? I know what you're thinking. You're like, man, just bring it to 4, make this so much easier. But that defeats the purpose. We're doing decimals. So we're going to put our decimal here. And we're going to act like this is just one big number. So 24 goes into 39 how many times? Going to 39 one time. I feel like I want to change colors here. 1 times 24 is 24. 39 minus 24, that gives us 15. And then we bring that on 9. 24 goes to 159 how many times? Let's see. 4 times is about 100, so probably 6 times. Let's find out. 24 times 6, 4, 2, 6 times 2 is 12, 14, 1, 44. Can we put another 24 in there? No, it's going to be too much. It's going to give us 168. So the most we can put in there is 6. So we're going to put 6 24s in there. 6 times 24 we just saw was 144. Subtract those. You're left with 5 and a 1. And we can bring down a 0. 24 goes to 150 how many times? All right, so it's still going to be 6. 6 times 24 is 144. And we got 6. We can bring down another 0. And you get the point. No pun intended, right? But you get the point that we can just continue doing this until we get a longer and longer decimal that's even more specific. But our answer is becoming clear. We got point. Actually, let's do this one last decimal. 24 goes into 60 how many times? It's like 2. This is 3 times is too much. So that's be 48 left over with 12. Oh, actually, it looks like it may. No, I don't know if it's going to stop there. So what does this mean? So this is our answer. So let's pull that out and stop there and say we got 0.166. I think that was a 2. Yes, 2. What does that mean? So now we're actually putting it in context because we got bottles of water and $3.99. So what does this mean? Well, that's our unit price. That's actually the cost per one bottle. So this is the cost per bottle, but we don't see numbers like this in cost, so we round that to the nearest hundredths place because we only have pennies. So we take that 0.16, we look to the right. We know it says bigger than 5, so we round this number up to 7. So this is telling us that each bottle is approximately 17 cents per bottle. Now that's good information because now we can compare bottle to bottle for that other deal I told you about and say, well, if this is 24 cents per bottle, that must be more than this one. And we can find a better deal. All right, what if you have a negative sign? So we're going to treat this like we did with multiplication. We're still going to divide like we normally do. We're just going to determine the sign first. We're like, okay, I know at the end of this, I'm going to have a negative answer. And you can write it down somewhere. I usually don't because I just check my answer just to make sure I did it right. So we're going to do 2.89 and divided by 3.4. So in this case, we have a decimal divided by a decimal. How do we handle this piece? Well, to divide by a decimal, we need to, let's read it. Make the divisor, remember the divisor is out here, a whole number. So we can't have it be a decimal. That's not going to work. How do we make it a whole number? Well, make it a whole number by moving the decimal point all the way to the right. Move the decimal point in the dividend the same number of spaces to the right. So we need to move this decimal all the way to the right as far as we can. 1 space here needs to go there. And since we did 1 here, we need to move this 1. So let's rewrite that. This ends up being 34 divided by not 2.89 but 8.9. And now we can get going. Now why does that work? Because if you remember, when we have fractions, let's say this was 11 and this was 4 over 3. By multiplying the dividend and the dividend and the divisor, so this is the dividend up top times 2 and times 2, we get equivalent fractions. And really that's what we're doing here. We're multiplying both of these by 10 to move that decimal to the right, if you remember. That's what we could do for our decimals. Multiply this by 10 and move it to the right one. So we didn't change anything, we just multiplied it by 10 to get that decimal, the divisor, to become a whole number. Let's go ahead and divide this. 34 can't go into 28. How many times into 289? Well, 10 times 34 is 340. So it's pretty close to that. I'm going to guess about 8 times. Let's see if that works. So let me work this out. 38 times 8. 24 plus 6 more is 28. 284. Yep. So that's 8. Gives us 284. 9 minus 8 is 1. 4. And we want to keep our decimal here. We can bring a 0 down. So we can go on 410. And that's going to be 34 times. It's going to be bigger than 10 because 340. So let's do, let's start with 12. 4 times 2 is 8. 6, 4, 3. That's 8, 10, and 408. Yay! That was a pretty good guess. All right, so that means I must have missed something if it's going in at 12. 3, 4, 41. Oh, it's because I put that in the wrong place. So, sorry. This needs to line up so that I have 1, 4. Well, I must have missed one because this 41 says I have another one in here. So 34 times 9, 6, 3. 9 times, that's 27. No, that's too much for 289. 34 times 8, 2, 3. That's 24, 25, 26, 27. That's what it is. So I did the math wrong here. This should be 27. 32, that's 2272. So instead of 284, I should have did 8 times 34 gave me 272. I put 248. So that changes things. So that's why. So I saw a big number like 41. I'm like, no, we missed something. And sometimes that happens. 8 times 34 is 272. That gives us 7, 1. So there you go. 34 doesn't go into 17. Then we bring down our 0. Now it makes more sense. So how many times can 34 go into 170? I'm going to guess 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's say 6. Let's see how far that gets us. 4, 24, 18, 19, 20. That's too much. 34 times 5, 2, 15, 16, 17. Yeah, perfect. So it ends up being 0.85. So that's as far as we can go because we're going to end up saying 5 times this is 170. It's going to give us 0. And we got to remember it's going to be a negative. So it's going to be a negative 0.85. And that's how you do it. So, and I'm going to leave my error in there. I could cut this error out, but I want you to see that this is how you need to think about your problems because you're going to make some mistakes too. And we can correct it and catch ourselves and say, hold on, that can't be right because if this is bigger than 34, that means we missed taking out a number. We should have went up to 9 or something. So I want you to see that that does happen. All right, what about this one here? Determine the sign is going to be positive because negative times a negative, negative divided by negative is positive. Make sure the divisor, make the divisor a whole number. So we're going to do that. So we're going to do 25.65 divided by 0.06. Now this divisor is not a whole number. How many spaces do I need to make it a whole number? 1, 2. So since I moved 2 spaces there, I need to take this decimal and move it 2. And basically what I'm doing is multiplying by 10. So if we had a fraction, I'm multiplying the top by 10 and the bottom by 10. So we're not changing the fraction at all. It's an equivalent fraction, but we're just doing that so it's easier for us to divide as a decimal. So now this becomes 6 divided by 2565. 2565, which is 2,565. Now it's a lot easier. So 6 goes into, it can't go into 2, it goes into 25 4 times, 24, bring 1, bring down to 6. 6 goes into 16 2 times. Subtract that, it gives us 45. 6 goes into 45, 5, 6, 7 times, because that's a 42. And we can bring down the 0 here. It's going to be a decimal because we've exceeded our numbers there. And that's going to be a 5. So we end up with 427.5. 427.5. And remember, it's going to be positive because we got negative divided by negative. All right, last one is 4 divided by 4 divided by 0.05. Is our divisor a whole number? No. So we're going to multiply it by 10, or in this case 100, 1, 2. to make it 5. Well, we can't just do it there. We need to take this decimal that's here, by the way, not over here, and move it 1, 2 spaces as well. By doing that, it gives us, instead of 400, and this becomes a pretty straightforward division problem. 5 goes into not 4, but 40 8 times, and it's going to be 80 because I know there's just a 0 there, but let's work it out just to show you. 0, bring down to 0, 5 goes into 0 0 times. 80 is our answer. So, how do we divide decimals using long division? How can we use decimal division to find unit cost? So we talked about finding unit cost. We just take that price and divide it by how many pieces, the number of pieces there are. In that case, it was bottles last time. How do we divide decimals using long division? Well, just make sure that the, you just put the decimal in there. Let's say 2, we started with something like that, and just make sure the decimals line up and divide as usual. That's one way. How do we divide decimal by another decimal? Just make sure the divisor, so if that was a divisor, 34.6, we need to make sure we move the decimal in such a way as to make it a whole number, and then move the decimal underneath the same amount of spaces before you start dividing. And how do we divide a whole number by decimal? That's what we just finished off. 4 divided by 0.05. We did the same thing. We multiplied both the divisor by 100 and the the dividend by 100. Well, that would do it for us today. Thanks again for tuning in. My name is Brandon Clayton, the Algebra Guy, and I will see you next lesson.